The city of Boston often hums with a dignified murmur, a blend of history and ambition that usually soothes my methodical mind. Beacon Hill, where I, Elias Thorne, have made my home for the better part of 2 decades, typically provides a quiet sanctuary from the urban sprawl. My 48 years have taught me the value of peace, of routine, of the quiet certainty that comes from knowing where you stand. I am by nature a man of observation, my cynicism a well-worn coat against the unpredictable world. I find comfort in patterns, in the predictable ebb and flow of life, and my apartment on Pinckney Street with its tall windows and old-growth trees outside has long been my bastion of order. My life, as I'd carefully constructed it, was a series of meticulously observed rituals. My morning coffee, black and bitter, consumed while reading the financial news. My afternoon walks tracing the same winding cobblestone paths, noting the subtle shifts in the historic architecture, the changing colors of the ivy on the brick. I valued my solitude, my carefully curated distance from the chaotic unpredictability of others. I had cultivated a life that, while perhaps not vibrant by some standards, was entirely predictably mine, and for years that had been enough, more than enough. It was a recovery, a rebuilding from a life that had once been meticulously dismantled. The building across the street, a brownstone much like my own, held a particular significance for me. It was where I had lived before, where my meticulously ordered life had first begun to unravel, thread by agonizing thread. I had moved out nearly 10 years ago, leaving behind a ghost of myself, a man who had lost his grip on reality thanks to a particularly insidious presence. Now I simply observed it from a distance, a morbid curiosity, like staring at an old scar. The first tremor in my carefully constructed peace came not from within my quiet walls, but from a chance encounter at the corner market. I was picking up my usual supply of single-origin beans when I overheard a snippet of conversation. A young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, was speaking animatedly to the cashier, her voice tight with a frustration that resonated with an unsettling familiarity. I don't understand it," she was saying, clutching a small bag of groceries. "Every night it's the same thing, and he just denies it, like I'm imagining things." My ears, always attuned to nuances, picked up on the stressed inflection in her voice, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. The cashier, a kindly woman named Martha who knew all the neighborhood gossip, simply offered a sympathetic nod. "Oh, darling," Martha said, her voice low. "Mr. Abernathy, you mean? He's a character, that one. Been in Building 17 for a long, long time." The name Mr. Abernathy hit me like a physical blow. The air in the small market seemed to thicken, pressing in on me. I felt a cold dread trickle down my spine. Mr. Abernathy, the same name, the same building. My past threatening to bleed into my present. My methodical nature, usually my greatest strength, was momentarily overcome by a surge of raw, unadulterated anger and a chilling sense of déjà vu. I retreated, pretending to examine a shelf of exotic spices, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had known, deep down, that a man like Abernathy wouldn't simply disappear. Predators rarely do. But I had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that his peculiar brand of torment was a chapter I had irrevocably closed. The young woman continued, oblivious to my internal turmoil. He keeps trying my door, like wiggling the handle, and then he denies it, totally gaslights me. It's making me paranoid." The words echoed in my mind, a horrifying replay of my own experiences. The subtle attempts, the maddening denials, the creeping sense that I was losing my mind. This was Abernathy's signature, a meticulously crafted campaign of psychological warfare designed to erode a person's sense of reality, one quiet, unsettling act at a time. My cynical heart, long accustomed to guarding itself, felt a flicker of something akin to protectiveness. Not for myself, no, I was beyond his reach now, but for this unknown woman, stumbling into the same nightmare I had endured. The young woman sighed, running a hand through her hair. I even left him a note, trying to be polite. He confronted me about it, denied it all, said I must be mistaken. But then, for the first time in ages, no door rattle, and then at 4 a.m. his door opening and closing, twice, loudly. It's like he's playing some kind of twisted game. A quiet fury began to simmer beneath my composed exterior. This was Abernathy's game, all right, I knew it intimately. He thrived on the psychological dance, the subtle manipulation, the slow erosion of sanity. My initial peace, the quiet certainty of my routine, felt suddenly fragile. This woman, so clearly distressed, was now a proxy for my past self. Her struggle was a mirror reflecting my own torment. My motivation, a deep-seated need to see justice served, not just for myself but for anyone else who might fall prey to his insidious tactics, began to crystallize. I left the market, my coffee beans forgotten, my meticulous schedule momentarily derailed. I walked past Building 17, my gaze drawn to the third-floor window I knew to be Abernathy's. My observational skills, usually employed for harmless pursuits, now sharpened into a laser focus. I imagined her, Sarah, that was the name Martha had let slip, living just one door down from him, her peace systematically dismantled. I knew her fear, the gnawing doubt that eats away at you when someone denies what you know to be true. I knew the insidious feeling of being targeted, of having your home, your sanctuary violated not by a break-in, but by the relentless psychological pressure of a neighbor from hell. That night my sleep was restless. My mind replayed the overheard conversation, overlaid with vivid, unwelcome memories of my own time in Building 17. The faint scrape of a key against a lock that wasn't mine, the phantom rattle of my own doorknob, the chillingly calm denials that followed. Abernathy had stripped me bare, leaving me with a profound distrust of my own perceptions. It had taken years of conscious effort, of methodical re-establishment of my routines and my sanity to claw my way back, and now he was doing it again. To someone else, I felt a surge of something I hadn't anticipated, a grim, determined resolve. My cynicism, usually a defense mechanism, morphed into a tool. My methodical nature, typically applied to my daily tasks, now had a new, compelling target. This wasn't just about Sarah. It was about reclaiming something I had lost, about ensuring that Abernathy's reign of quiet terror was finally, irrevocably brought to an end. It was about justice, not just for the young woman, but for the Elias Thorne who had been driven from his home, from his peace, all those years ago. The memory of my own struggle, the feeling of utter helplessness, fueled a cold, precise anger. I wouldn't let this happen again. Not on my watch. I understood the game Abernathy played. I had been a pawn in it once. Now I would become the unseen player, the strategic ally who understood the rules better than anyone. I began to formulate a plan, a quiet, almost invisible intervention. Sarah was suffering, and I knew exactly what she was going through. My role was clear: to guide her, to empower her, and ultimately to ensure Abernathy faced the consequences he had so long avoided. For those who find themselves caught in similar unseen battles, where sanity feels like a fragile shield against relentless torment, I urge you to seek out others who understand. Subscribe to Neighbours From Hell channel for new Neighbours From Hell stories daily. You are not alone, and there are patterns to these kinds of torments, and therefore patterns to their resolution. I had learned those patterns the hard way, and now it was time to put that painful knowledge to use. My past promised a dark knowledge that would, I hoped, pay off for someone else's future. The next morning I observed Building 17 with renewed intensity. I saw Sarah leave for work, her shoulders slightly hunched, a tired weariness in her gait. My heart ached for her, but my mind was already racing, analyzing, connecting. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute. This was a calculated act of psychological aggression, and I, Elias Thorne, was uniquely equipped to recognize it for what it was. The game had begun, and this time Abernathy wouldn't be playing against a naive victim. He would be playing against me. My first step was to approach Martha at the market again. I waited until the lunch rush had died down, and then, feigning a casual interest in local happenings, I steered the conversation towards Building 17. "I heard you talking to that young woman yesterday," I began, my voice even, carefully modulated. "The one about the door trouble. Sarah, I believe you called her." Martha's eyes, usually so bright with neighborhood gossip, clouded with concern. "Oh, bless her heart. Yes, Sarah. She just moved in a few months ago. Such a sweet girl. But that Mr. Abernathy, he's a menace. Always has been. The police have been called before, but he's clever, never leaves a trace." My mind latched onto "never leaves a trace." That was precisely his MO. He operated in the shadows, his weapon the creeping doubt he instilled in his victims. My own experiences, the sheer difficulty of proving his subtle intrusions, resurfaced with painful clarity. "Called the police, you say?" I prompted, feigning mild surprise. "And nothing came of it." Martha shook her head sadly. "They say it's a civil matter, or they can't prove intent. He's always got an excuse. I thought it was my door. I'm just checking the mail. I have a condition that makes me restless at night." He's got an answer for everything, and he makes them feel like they're the problem. Abernathy's classic gaslighting. It was a well-honed skill when he deployed with chilling precision. He didn't just deny, he inverted reality, making his victim question their own senses, their own sanity. My stomach tightened into a knot of familiar dread. "Does she have security cameras?" I asked, my voice still outwardly calm. Martha brightened slightly. "She put one up, yes, little doorbell camera, but he just smiles at it. He knows it's not enough." She showed me a clip once, him reaching for the handle, then stopping, turning, and just smiling into the camera before denying it when she confronted him. "It's unnerving, Ilias." Unnerving was an understatement. It was a declaration of war, a calculated taunt. Abernathy knew the limits of the law, the loopholes, the frustrating lack of recourse for psychological torment. He enjoyed it. My cynical side appreciated the dark cunning of it, even as my moral compass spun wildly out of control. I thanked Martha, bought my neglected coffee beans, and returned to my apartment. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, a horrifyingly familiar pattern. Sarah was living my past, and I, Elias Thorne, had the bitter, hard-won knowledge to help her escape it. My method, my observational skills, and my deep-seated motivation were all coalescing into a singular, unwavering purpose. I needed to reach Sarah, but not as a knight in shining armor. I needed to be the unseen guide, the whisper in her ear, leading her through the labyrinth of Abernathy's mind games. My first thought was to approach her directly, to tell her about my past with Abernathy. But my cynicism immediately dismissed the idea. Who would believe a stranger's wild tale of a decades-long vendetta? She would think I was a madman, or worse, another one of Abernathy's unwitting pawns. No, I needed to be subtle, strategic. I needed to arm her with the tools she needed without revealing my hand. I spent the next few days observing Building 17, not just Abernathy, but Sarah's movements, the patterns of the building. I noticed her mail slot, the slight gap beneath her door. A thought sparked, an anonymous note, carefully crafted, providing actionable advice, not just sympathy. This was my strength, meticulous planning, the invisible hand guiding the narrative. I drafted the note on my computer, choosing a generic font, printing it on a common paper stock. No personal details, no identifying marks, just a message, clear and concise, rooted in my own painful experience. It read to the resident of apartment 3B, I understand you're experiencing difficulties with a neighbor. Please know that you are not alone and your perceptions are valid. I urge you to consider the following, document everything, no matter how small. Every sound, every suspicious movement, every interaction. Use a hidden voice recorder for conversations. A doorbell camera is good, but consider an interior motion-activated camera pointed at your door, capturing the sound of the handle and any lingering presence. Be precise with timestamps. Compile a detailed log. Seek legal counsel specializing in harassment, but be prepared for a long fight. This is not random, it is calculated. Do not engage more than necessary. Trust your instincts, a concerned resident who understands. I folded the note, slipped it into an unmarked envelope. Then, under the cover of a late-night stroll, I walked past Building 17. Sarah's apartment was on the 3rd floor. I slipped the envelope into her mailbox, my heart a strange mix of apprehension and grim satisfaction. The fuse was lit. I watched not just Sarah, but Abernathy. I saw him leave his apartment, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, a familiar glint in his eyes. He was enjoying himself. He thought he was untouchable. My cynicism deepened, but it was a cold, useful cynicism now, not the paralyzing kind. I knew his game, and I was about to teach him a very unpleasant lesson. Days turned into weeks. I continued my observations, noting the slight changes in Sarah's demeanor. She seemed more focused, less prone to the hurried, defeated slump I'd initially observed. My anonymous note, I hoped, had given her a glimmer of hope, a sense that she wasn't losing her mind. And Abernathy, he was still Abernathy. The occasional deliberate clatter of his door late at night, the subtle, almost imperceptible linger near her door before retreating. He was testing her, playing with her, and I was watching. My internal monologue was a constant hum of analysis. My methodical mind was dissecting every action, every reaction. I started keeping my own log, a parallel record of Abernathy's movements from my vantage point across the street. The way he would leave his curtains slightly ajar, the specific times he'd come and go, the way he'd pause just a beat too long in the hallway. These were the minute details that my observant nature picked up, the tiny threads that would eventually weave into a complete tapestry of his psychological warfare. I knew Sarah would hit walls just as I had. The frustration of dealing with authorities who saw only civil disputes, the insidious gaslighting that eroded self-belief, the sheer emotional exhaustion. This was the crucible, the part of the journey where most victims gave up, allowing Abernathy to claim another psychological victory. But Sarah had me, an unseen ally, a ghost from his past, ready to guide her through the darkness. The progression of her struggle, I knew, would mirror my own, but this time the ending would be different. This time there would be justice. My commitment to Sarah's plight deepened with each passing day, fueled by the ghosts of my own torment. I found myself reliving the maddening helplessness, the insidious erosion of my sanity that Abernathy had orchestrated years ago when I lived in that very building. Every time I saw Sarah leave for work, her shoulders still tense, a flicker of that same old despair would ignite within me. I remembered the nights I lay awake, straining my ears, convinced I heard the soft click of my own doorknob, only to find it securely locked in the morning. Abernathy had a way of blurring the lines between reality and paranoia, a master of the psychological slow burn. I decided my next move needed to be more direct, but still carefully veiled. Sarah needed legal guidance, specifically from someone who understood the nuances of harassment and nuisance laws in Massachusetts. My methodical approach dictated that I research thoroughly. I spent hours poring over legal databases, cross-referencing case law, searching for any precedent that could aid a victim of such subtle, yet devastating, psychological torment. My cynicism, usually a barrier, now served as a sharp tool, anticipating the legal arguments Abernathy's lawyers might deploy, foreseeing the hurdles Sarah would inevitably face. I found a small, independent law firm downtown, known for taking on complex, often challenging cases, especially those involving the gray areas of neighbor disputes. They had a reputation for tenacity. Perfect. I drafted another anonymous letter to Sarah, this time including a business card for the law firm, along with a note outlining the specific types of evidence she would need to build a compelling case. Detailed logs, audio recordings, video footage, even from inside your apartment focusing on the door, witness statements if possible. emphasized the psychological distress and pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents. I even highlighted sections of relevant Massachusetts statutes that might apply. I was, after all, methodical. I slipped this new package into her mailbox late one evening, feeling a surge of grim satisfaction. I was providing the ammunition, guiding her toward the battlefield. The burden of proof would still be hers, but now she would be armed. A week later, I saw a familiar car parked outside Building 17, a distinct, slightly battered sedan with the logo of the very law firm I had suggested. A small victory, a tiny payoff in this long, arduous game. Sarah was listening. She was fighting back, but Abernathy, I knew, wouldn't take this lying down. His behavior, as predicted, escalated. He seemed to sense Sarah's renewed resolve, reacting to it like a cornered rat. The subtle door wiggling became more pronounced, lasting longer. The nocturnal door theatrics intensified, the loud opening and slamming of his door now accompanied by what sounded like deliberate stomping, right above her bedroom. I could hear it even from my apartment across the street, a low, guttural thud that vibrated through the quiet Beacon Hill nights. My observational instincts were on high alert. I noticed Abernathy leaving his apartment for extended periods, only to return in the dead of night, sometimes accompanied by a low, guttural chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. He was adapting, finding new ways to assert his dominance, to remind Sarah that her home was not her sanctuary. One afternoon, I witnessed a truly disturbing exchange. Sarah was trying to unlock her door, her hands fumbling with her keys, when Abernathy emerged from his apartment. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, leaning against his door frame, his eyes fixed on her. A slow, unsettling smile spread across his face, not one of amusement, but of cold, predatory pleasure. Sarah froze, her back to me, but I could practically feel her discomfort radiate across the street. "Having trouble with your locks, dear," Abernathy drawled, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet afternoon. "Perhaps they're misaligned. Sometimes things just don't quite fit, do they?" The insinuation hung heavy in the air, a thinly veiled threat. He was openly mocking her, subtly referencing his attempts on her door, reveling in her fear. Sarah quickly unlocked her door and vanished inside, her movements stiff with barely contained anger. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just gaslighting, it was outright psychological torture. He was pushing her, deliberately testing her limits. My own memories flooded back. The time I'd found my mail scattered on the floor outside my door, Abernathy insisting it must have fallen out. The subtle yet unmistakable scent of cigarette smoke wafting into my non-smoking apartment, him claiming it was from a neighbor on another floor. The constant chipping away at my sense of security, my perception of reality. He'd made me question everything, even my own sanity. He'd worn me down, piece by agonizing piece, until moving felt like the only way to save myself. My motivation to see him finally dealt with intensified into a burning inferno. I knew Sarah was documenting everything just as I had advised, but I also knew the toll it took. The endless cycle of frustration, of hoping for legal recourse only to be met with bureaucratic apathy or the frustratingly high bar of proof. My cynicism warned me that this alone might not be enough. Abernathy was too adept at operating in the gray areas. I started to dig deeper, beyond just legal precedent. I used my observational skills, the kind I'd honed as a cynical observer of human nature, to probe into Abernathy's past. I remembered bits and pieces from my own time in the building, hushed whispers from old tenants who had also abruptly moved out. It wasn't just me. He had a history. I spent hours cross-referencing public records, old newspaper archives, even obscure online forums dedicated to neighbor disputes. It was tedious, painstaking work, the kind only a methodical and highly motivated individual like myself would undertake. What I uncovered was disturbing. Abernathy had a pattern, not just in Building 17, before that in a building in Cambridge, and before that in the North End. Each time a similar narrative, subtle harassment, gaslighting, eventual departures of tormented neighbors, and Abernathy remaining untouched, a phantom tormentor. He was like a virus, replicating his insidious behavior, infecting one peaceful home after another. This was the key. Not just Sarah's current torment, but the long, unbroken chain of his victims. If I could link them, demonstrate a pattern of behavior that spanned years and multiple residences, it would transform Sarah's individual complaint into something far more significant, something the authorities couldn't easily dismiss. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute, it was a psychological crime spree. My pursuit became an obsession. My methodical nature, usually focused on financial markets, now applied itself with chilling precision to Abernathy's life. I discovered he was a recluse, no discernible family, no obvious job. How did he support himself? A trust fund, perhaps, or something more illicit? My cynical mind entertained all possibilities. One particularly frustrating afternoon, I watched Sarah leaving the law firm, her shoulders slumped, a look of utter defeat on her face. My heart sank. They had hit rock bottom. The legal system, designed for clear-cut conflicts, was failing her just as it had failed me. Abernathy had likely dismissed their cease and desist letters with a wave of his hand, perhaps even filed a frivolous counter-complaint to tie them up in knots. That night I saw Sarah's lights on late into the evening. I imagined her pacing, despairing, perhaps even considering giving up, packing her bags and leaving Beacon Hill to escape the torment. The thought sent a jolt of cold dread through me. I knew that feeling, the crushing weight of helplessness, the desire to simply flee. I had done it once. I wouldn't let her do it now. My rock bottom had been a quiet surrender, a bitter retreat. Her rock bottom, I vowed, would be the catalyst for his downfall. The time for being an unseen ally through anonymous notes was over. It was time for a more direct, yet still strategic intervention. My resolve hardened, a cold, unwavering steel. I was done with shadows. I needed to step into the light, even if it meant risking my own meticulously guarded peace. The raw fury I felt for Sarah and for my past self was a tangible thing, a pulsating energy that coursed through my veins. I remembered how Abernathy had slowly, deliberately dismantled my life. He'd done more than just wiggle my doorknob. He de-rigged my apartment buzzer to randomly go off at all hours, then denied it. He'd unscrewed my light bulbs in the hallway and blamed the building's wiring. He'd even reported me to the building management for fictitious noise complaints, leading to escalating warnings that made me feel like I was the problematic tenant. He'd made me doubt my memory, my perceptions, and ultimately my sanity. The emotional toll had been immense, pushing me to the brink of a nervous breakdown. My life had become a constant state of hypervigilance, and eventually I had cracked. I had packed up my life, fled the building, and vowed to never look back, but the scars remained. And now seeing Sarah go through a similar, albeit less extreme, torment ignited a furious resolve within me. I knew with absolute certainty that this time Abernathy would pay. He had caused too much pain, too much quiet devastation. My methodical mind, no longer content with anonymous guidance, began to construct a new, more aggressive plan. This would be a multi-pronged assault, leveraging every piece of information I had gathered, every painful memory, every cynical observation. First, I needed to approach Sarah directly, no more anonymous notes. This required a delicate touch. I couldn't just knock on her door and declare myself her savior. My cynical nature warned me against immediate trust, so I crafted a new strategy. I waited until I saw her leaving for her morning run, a habit I'd noted in my observations. As she emerged from Building 17, I casually stumbled into her path, dropping a handful of papers as if by accident. "Oh, excuse me, my apologies," I said, bending down to gather them, making eye contact. "Elias Thorne, I live just across the street. I think we spoke briefly at Martha's Market a while back." Sarah, looking surprised but polite, offered a small smile. "Sarah Jenkins, yes, I remember, you were looking at the coffee." "Indeed," I replied, my voice calm, almost understated. "Sarah, I have to be direct. I've noticed certain patterns in Building 17, and I believe I know what you're going through." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something, hope, suspicion, crossing her face. "Mr. Abernathy," I continued, my voice low and serious. "He did the same to me for years in that very building, apartment 3C right next to yours." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Her face paled and her mouth fell open slightly. You lived there. He did this to you too." Her voice was barely a whisper, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming relief. "Every single thing you've experienced," I affirmed, my gaze unwavering. "The door wiggling, the gaslighting, the nocturnal rituals, the subtle torments that make you feel like you're losing your mind. He's a master of it. He systematically dismantled my life, pushed me to the brink until I had no choice but to leave." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of a profound, raw vindication. "Oh my God," she breathed. I honestly thought I was going crazy. The lawyers, they said it was hard to prove. They just didn't understand." "They don't," I agreed, my cynicism evident. "Because he operates in the gray, but I understand. I know his methods intimately. And I've spent the past few weeks observing him and researching his past. He has a history, Sarah. A long, dark history of doing this to people in multiple locations. He's left a trail of victims." I then explained my role, my initial anonymous notes, and the information I'd gathered. I told her about the other potential victims I'd started to uncover from old addresses. Her initial skepticism quickly dissolved into a potent mix of anger and desperate hope. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of her frustration. "I'm at my wit's end. I can't live like this anymore. We fight fire with fire," I stated, my tone firm, "but we do it methodically. We use his own tactics against him, but with irrefutable evidence. He relies on plausible deniability. We will remove all plausibility." My plan, which I meticulously laid out over the next few days in my apartment, involved several key components. 1. The comprehensive surveillance system. Sarah had a doorbell camera, but it wasn't enough. My observant nature knew that. We needed total coverage. I advised her on purchasing and installing not just a better exterior camera, but also hidden cameras inside her apartment, focused on the door, capable of capturing high-quality audio. This would record not only the sounds of the doorknob being tampered with, but also the subtle vibrations and the specific times. I helped her select models that were discreet, easy to install, and had long battery lives and cloud storage too. The unified log and cross-referencing. Sarah had kept a log, but it was often emotional and anecdotal. I showed her how to refine it, transforming it into an irrefutable legal document. Every incident, date, time to the second, cross-referenced with camera timestamps, detailed description, her emotional response briefly, and any witnesses. We would cross-reference my observations from across the street with her internal recordings, creating an unbreakable timeline. My methodical mind found perverse satisfaction in this meticulous data collection. 3. The witness network, my past, her present, this was the linchpin. My years of cynical observation had taught me that there were always other victims, other whispers. I had started to trace Abernathy's previous addresses. Now, with Sarah's permission, I began the arduous task of contacting former residents of Building 17 and his previous buildings. It was a long shot, reaching out to people who had likely tried to forget their own torment. Many hung up, some were too scared, but a few, fueled by a lingering bitterness or a surprising sense of justice, agreed to speak. My own story, shared carefully, resonated with their unspoken suffering. It was a painstaking, often emotionally draining process, but each former victim who came forward added another nail to Abernathy's coffin. We unearthed stories of property damage, stalking, false accusations, and the same maddening gaslighting. 4. The psychological profile and countermeasures. My observational skills allowed me to build a psychological profile of Abernathy. He was a narcissist, thriving on control and the quiet suffering of others. He saw himself as superior, untouchable. This knowledge was crucial. It meant direct confrontation was useless, as he would simply deny and deflect. But exposing his game, his deliberate cruelty, in a way he couldn't deny, that would be his undoing. We needed to hit him where it hurt, his perceived invulnerability. The implementation of the plan was a test of patience and nerve. Abernathy, sensing Sarah's renewed strength, escalated his tactics further. The nocturnal door opening and closing became a symphony of bangs and thuds. He would leave his television blaring at all hours, the muffled sounds of late-night talk shows and infomercials seeping through the walls. He started leaving bizarre, menacing objects outside Sarah's door: a single dead flower, a small, unsettling doll, a crumpled note with a single, unsettling word like "watching" scrawled on it. He was pushing her, trying to break her. The emotional toll on Sarah was immense. Despite her resolve, there were days she would call me, her voice trembling, close to tears. "He knows, Elias, he knows I'm doing something. He's trying to break me." My cynicism helped me. I told her, "He senses a shift in power. This is his final desperate lashing out. It means we're winning. Every one of these new incidents is more evidence." My own sleep was disrupted. The memories of my torment were sharper now, vivid nightmares of Abernathy's sneering face, his chilling denials. I found myself pacing my apartment late into the night, the weight of our shared past and present pressing down on me. There were moments of doubt, moments when my cynical mind whispered that he was truly untouchable, that he would slip through the cracks again. My own rock bottom years ago had been the quiet resignation, the feeling that I had no recourse. I had been overwhelmed, driven out. I vowed that Sarah, that we would not be. Subscribe to Neighbours From Hell channel for new Neighbours From Hell stories daily. I found myself murmuring, almost as a mantra, during one particularly late night of data analysis. It was a reminder that this silent battle was universal, that countless others were trapped in similar hells, and that solutions, however hard won, existed. The turning point came when Sarah captured a particularly damning piece of footage. It was late at night, and the internal camera recorded Abernathy's door slowly opening, his hand reaching out, not just to wiggle her handle, but to slowly, deliberately insert a thin wire into her keyhole. He pulled it out, then repeated the action, all while staring directly into where the doorbell camera was located, a chillingly triumphant smile on his face. The recording also captured his soft, almost inaudible chuckle, confirming that this was a deliberate act of violation, not a random, confused gesture. The wire was a new escalation, a clear attempt to bypass her locks. This was no longer just nuisance, it was an attempted break-in, a direct threat to her security. This evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. It was the crack in Abernathy's carefully constructed facade, and then another piece fell into place. One of the former tenants I'd contacted, a nervous woman who had moved out of the Cambridge building years ago, reluctantly agreed to meet. She brought with her a folder, brittle with age, filled with police reports and incident logs. Among them, a report from nearly 15 years ago, detailing an incident where Abernathy had been caught on surveillance footage tampering with the mailboxes in a former building, attempting to steal mail. He depleted it down to a minor offense, but it showed a pattern of covert, intrusive behavior beyond just door wiggling. This was the final piece of the puzzle, tying his current behavior to a documented criminal past, a history of going beyond mere nuisance. With the irrefutable evidence of the wire incident, coupled with the growing dossier of historical complaints and witness testimonies, we had everything we needed. It built a case so airtight, so overwhelmingly detailed, that even the most cynical of authorities would have to take notice. We had the smoking gun, the grand payoff was finally within reach. My cynicism had prepared me for a long, drawn-out battle, but my methodical preparation had given us an unexpected advantage. Abernathy, who relied on the subtlety of his torment, was about to face the blinding light of undeniable truth. My meticulous planning culminated in a final, decisive action. With the damning footage of Abernathy tampering with Sarah's lock, along with the detailed logs and the growing list of former victims I had uncovered, we had an undeniable case. This wasn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. It was a pattern of harassment and attempted invasion that warranted serious intervention. I contacted Sarah's lawyer directly, this time identifying myself and providing a summary of the additional evidence. The lawyer, initially skeptical, grew increasingly stunned as I laid out the depth of my research and the damning nature of the new footage. My calm, methodical delivery, coupled with the sheer volume of meticulously organized evidence, seemed to convince him of the severity and scope of Abernathy's actions. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice laced with a newfound respect, "this changes everything. This isn't a civil matter anymore. This is a criminal complaint. And we have enough for an emergency restraining order and an eviction notice." The words were like music to my ears. Justice, cold and precise, was finally within our grasp. My methodical mind immediately shifted into execution mode. We decided on a coordinated strike. Sarah's lawyer would file for the emergency restraining order and the eviction notice simultaneously. At the same time, I would contact the local precinct, directly providing them with the key video evidence and the comprehensive dossier of Abernathy's historical abuses. I explained to the police with a chillingly detached clarity the years of torment I had personally endured at his hands, connecting it directly to Sarah's current plight. My cynicism, usually a shield, now became a weapon, allowing me to present the facts without emotional embellishment, making the case all the more compelling. The police, presented with irrefutable video evidence of attempted lock tampering and a clear pattern of targeted harassment, acted swiftly. They couldn't ignore it. The sheer volume and meticulous detail of the evidence, bolstered by my personal testimony and the statements from other former victims, transformed Abernathy from a mere nuisance into a genuine threat. The morning of the confrontation was crisp and cold, a typical Beacon Hill day. I watched from my window across the street, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. Sarah, looking pale but resolute, remained in her apartment. The lawyer had advised her to stay put. Just after 9 a.m., a police cruiser pulled up outside Building 17. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a representative from the building management company and Sarah's lawyer. I saw them knock on Abernathy's door. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. After a tense few minutes, Abernathy opened the door. From my vantage point, I could see his usual smirk, the practiced nonchalance. But then, as the officers spoke, as they held up the legal documents, as they clearly showed him a still frame from Sarah's camera footage, his face began to crumble. The color drained from his cheeks. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, then a flicker of raw, unadulterated fear. He ranted, he raved, he denied. But this time his gaslighting fell on deaf ears. There was no room for ambiguity. The evidence was irrefutable. The officers calmly explained the restraining order, the eviction notice, and the potential criminal charges he now faced. They escorted him out, allowing him only a few minutes to grab essential items. As he was led down the steps, handcuffed, his eyes darted nervously, finally landing on my window. For a split second, our gazes locked. His eyes, usually filled with predatory cunning, were now wide with a chilling understanding, a flash of pure, impotent rage. He knew. He finally knew. The triumph that washed over me was profound, a deep, resonant satisfaction that settled in the very marrow of my bones. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, precise, mirroring my own methodical nature. The disruptive behavior had ceased. The problematic neighbor faced fitting, permanent consequences. He was gone. In the days that followed, a palpable sense of peace descended upon Building 17. Sarah emerged from her apartment, her shoulders no longer hunched, a genuine smile replacing her strained politeness. She came to my door, a small vase of flowers in her hand. "Elias," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved me. You saved my sanity." I merely nodded, a rare, small smile touching my lips. "Justice, Sarah, it was long overdue, for both of us." The long-term consequences were immediate and profound. Sarah's apartment, once a place of fear, became a true sanctuary. The building management, alerted to Abernathy's extensive history and the potential for a class-action lawsuit from former tenants, tightened their screening processes. The neighborhood, once quietly plagued by Abernathy's subtle terror, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. As for me, Elias Thorne, I found a measure of peace I hadn't known since my own ordeal. The ghosts of my past, once so vivid and tormenting, finally began to recede. My motivation, a deep-seated need to see justice served, had been fulfilled. My cynicism hadn't disappeared, of course. It was far too ingrained for that. But it now felt less like a heavy cloak and more like a finely honed instrument, ready to observe the world, but perhaps also to protect it. The surprising twist: weeks after Abernathy's eviction, I received an anonymous package in my mail slot. Inside, a small, worn journal. It was Abernathy's. Scrawled inside in precise, unsettling handwriting were entries detailing his experiments, his psychological studies on his victims. He meticulously documented their reactions, their breaking points, his methods of gaslighting. And on the very last page, a single chilling sentence scrawled in bold, angry letters: Thorn, the one who got away, but they always come back. It was a final, unsettling reminder that while one battle was won, the darkness in human nature, the methodical cruelty, sometimes lingered. But I had faced it down once, and I would face it again if necessary. For now, Beacon Hill could finally rest easy. And I, Elias Thorne, finally had my peace. Subscribe to Neighbours from Hell channel for new Neighbours from Hell stories daily.